have to be honest. I don't know if this is really a story. And so I'm prefacing this video with that. Also, I have qualms with doing this story because, again, I have a stated objective in the race that's taking place in Texas, in that I want Ted Cruz to fail and lose, and I want it to burn, and I want to cover his speech where he renounces his Senate seat, essentially congratulating Beto over beating the stuffing out of him, running as a flaming lefty in Texas, in this deep, supposedly red, theocratic Texas that Ted Cruz believes in. That's what I want to see. That would make my day. I will sip tea, English tea, black tea, cha, as it's called here in Portugal, and I will watch that, and it would make my day. Regardless of whatever bad is taking place in my life, whatever bad is taking place in that moment, that will be a bubble of brightness that I can live in for the duration of the time that Ted Cruz is given that speech. I want it to hurt when he walks off stage. I want it to hurt when he's sitting in a car with his wife that Donald Trump called ugly. I want it to hurt when he rides home and gets in his very plush, expensive bed. I want it to hurt when he takes off the plastic face and it's 3 a.m. with him and his God, and it's just this pain of loss. That's what I want. I agree that's schadenfreude. I agree that makes me not necessarily the best of people in this regards, but it is what it is. It's politics. And I don't necessarily think Ted Cruz is the best of human beings. So yes, between Beto and between Ted Cruz, I would take Beto any day of the week and twice on Sundays, even though I don't have this belief that Beto is this flaming lefty that he says he is. I go in with my eyes open. That said, I think Ted Cruz is dramatically worse. So there is always a hedge, and there's always this, oh, fuck, when stories like this come up. And yet, to some degree, I'm compelled to do it just based on the position of the channel that I've taken. It's almost like you're forced just by the events. One of my subscribers sent me a link from Big League Politics pointing out a story saying that Beto has a secret billionaire. That's interesting. What do you mean secret billionaire? There's a close billionaire to Beto that has been kept private, that I have not heard about, that apparently many other people have not heard about, that many of the stories have never even covered. And I wonder whether even this is really a story, because I'm not quite fully and entirely sure how this affects Beto. So I'm gonna just ask the question. Is it a story? The New York Times runs a piece. Oh, my signal is flipping in and out. So the New York Times runs a piece. This. The video will be okay at the end, I promise. The buffering is there in order to make sure the video is okay at the point when it finishes. Beto once supported an El Paso real estate deal Barrio residents remember. Interesting. Now, many of the Barrio residents, what it boiled down to is they were trying to renovate a barrio. They were trying to renovate an area that was held by Hispanics. In trying to renovate that area, one of the people that was involved in that process was a billionaire that was a billionaire, William D. Sanders. Now, William B. Sanders, let's see, where is it? So, all right. So this is when he was in, the investors wanted to read, I'll just read it. At a special city council meeting in 2006, a billionaire real estate investor unveiled his vision for redeveloping downtown El Paso. To replace the tenants and boarded up buildings, he proposed restaurants, shops, and art walk, rivaling San Antonio's Riverwalk. The same thing is happening in Richmond. And the certain area where my wife and I used to live, it's kind of like this artsy area. They're renovating it. They're turning it. They're making all sorts of stores and buildings and all this other stuff around the river. Representative Beto O'Rourke, one of hundreds attending, wasn't exactly a disinterested party. Now, here's the problem, and here's the catch. One of the people who were investors in this was a billionaire, William Sanders. William Sanders is the father-in-law to Beto. Essentially, Beto married well. The woman that Beto married essentially had the dad of William Sanders, and William Sanders is like $20 billion, meaning Beto is married into a significant amount of cash. And in this particular case, the father-in-law was one of the investors in this property. They were trying to avoid using eminent domain in order to take people's land, and so they were working with deals and all this other stuff. But many of the residents had a certain distaste in their mouth in the way that they went about this. And in some of these cases, there were questions on whether there was a conflict of interest, which you can think off the top of your head, the answer is yes. Let's be honest. If your father-in-law is one of the investors in a particular property, yeah, it comes across as a conflict of interest if you are a legislator and you are making votes in regards to this. In some of the cases, Beto abstained from votes. In other cases, he did vote on it. Look, regardless of whether some of the residents have a bad taste in their mouth, many of the residents still say, despite having a bad taste in their mouth, they will still vote for him, which gets across that it's not that bad of a taste, despite having qualms with what took place from the real estate deal. The story that Big League Politics comes up with is Beto's married into money, even though he's running as progressive. And if Beto wants to raise taxes, is Beto going to really raise taxes on her father-in-law? I got to be honest, I don't know if that's a story. I don't necessarily think that just because you've married into money that you can't necessarily run as a lefty. I don't necessarily, that's a non sequitur. I see people make that argument saying, well, Sanders is a millionaire because Sanders wrote a book where he got millions off the book. How is Sanders a socialist and a millionaire? This seems utter nonsense to me. This seems like utter nonsense. But it could be wrong. And the argument could be made that in his capacity as a senator, would Beto be in a situation where he would do favors for his father-in-law? That's a fair argument. The argument of him running as a lefty, though, because he married his dad, is nonsense. But whether or not that would give a certain amount of influence to the billionaire, that's more fair. That's more fair. Is it a conflict of interest? But I don't know if it's a real story. So I'm going to open this up to questions rather early. Because I got to be honest, I thought about this story for a day and I thought, I didn't quite know how I feel about this. Beto, that candidate. I went to a Beto fundraiser in 2017. He talked about not taking corporate money while Chucky the Shoom was sitting right behind him. He gave me a bullshit answer on why he didn't co-sponsor HR 676. He's a neoliberal, but he's still better than Ted Cruz. Right there, right there. That's honest. That's an acknowledgement of, look, he's not necessarily what he proclaims to be, but God, Ted Cruz is gross. Ted Cruz is gross. He is gross. He is gross. He's gross. He's gross. Gentrification. Yes, it was gentrification. Am I the only one buffering? No, you're not. Beto is not a lefty. He's better than Cruz, but that's like being better than a gas station burger. No, I can do one better than that. That's like getting a taco from a Chinese restaurant that's in a strip mall set for renovation. Who cares about the lesser of two evils? Screw Beto. Like Ted Cruz. Fuck that. Fuck that. This is not, this is, your understanding of the stuff is very shallow, Jay. If you had a candidate where there is a certain degree of progress, significant progress, I'll take it. It's a scale. It's a gradient. And the gradient is up to the individual. It's not an absolute in any case. In the case of Hillary Clinton, that's a fail. I'm sorry you voted for her, but that's a fail. In the case of Beto over Ted Cruz, yes, I'll take it. I'll take it. No, I'm sorry. Your candidate that you chose failed on a massive fucking level. And for whatever reason, you still haven't been able to deal with that. You haven't been able to deal with that. And by the way, the lesser evil thing, like I said, it's a gradient. It's not an absolute. I've never said it was an absolute. It is a situation where there needs to be a change. My candidate was cheated. That's true. By your candidate. Yes, that is true. My candidate was cheated by your candidate. And then your candidate turned around and lost to a reality show host. That's reality. You voted for a person that lost reality shows. Can't believe you're not embarrassed by that. But okay. Keep voting for your hacks and your corporate hacks. Good luck with that. But someone needs to run who's actual progressive for that seat in 4 years regardless. You're talking about for Texas? Here's the thing. I mean, look, you do have to take into account where you are. Like, the politics in Texas are going to be different than the politics, let's say, in Virginia. I watched the debate between Beto and Ted Cruz, and I got to be honest, I thought I was on a different planet. I looked at that argument, and I was like, oh, God, oh, God. Ted Cruz structures his arguments in these religious terms. And to me, it's like, oh, God, that's so gross. Why would anybody take that argument? But clearly, Ted Cruz won Texas, which means that Ted Cruz, there are people in Texas, at least the majority that voted, that put him in that office. Now, Beto, to his own credit, wasn't necessarily doing that in that debate. Yeah, I take him. I take him. Is this a pawn Beto take pawn Cruz scenario, or pawn takes king? I don't think either one of these guys are pawns or kings. I mean, they're senators. They're going to be there for 6 years. But Cruz ran for president in the Republican Party. Cruz could have potentially won. Like, it is not outside this idea of normality that Cruz couldn't win. And if Cruz had won the primary, you would have President Cruz today. It is not clear whether Hillary Clinton could have beat Ted Cruz. And when you look at the polling, oh God, it's terrifying. It's fucking terrifying. And by the way, Cruz would have been a far better, he's far more intelligent than Trump. He would have been able to manipulate the political edifice far better, and the Republicans would have fell in line. They would have fell in line. Texas has an economic inequality. It can be receptive to the progressive stance, which is why Beto took this stance. I mean, this is not necessarily out of the blue. If you're failing miserably in Texas, running as a status quo candidate, why continue to run as a status quo candidate? Why? Shake shit up. Shake it up. All right, I'm going to end it here. No, my candidate was Bernie Sanders. Your candidate cheated my candidate. Full stop. The party that you support cheated the candidate that millions of people supported. And those millions of people that supported, some of which pulled themselves out of the political process because of what your party did. Let's understand the reality that we're dealing with. Jill Stein was a secondary candidate that I chose because she was the one that represented my interests over everybody else that ran. That's what it boils down to. All right, I'll end this here. Neither can move well, but one is safer. You're talking about Beto? Yeah, Beto is a safer bet. Beto is a safer bet. Not to mention, I want Ted Cruz to lose. God, I want him to lose. You have no idea how much I want him to lose. And the polls are tightening. He has a chance. And this argument that you can't run as a lefty in Texas gets completely abolished. It destroys this argument that in order to win in Texas, you have to be this kind of right-wing Democrat or this kind of wishy-washy invertebrate. Chess metaphor, yes. Beto is a castle king in the corner. Cruz is a bishop on a quarter space. It's multi-party. Neither can move well, but one is safer. Beto is a castle king in a corner. It's not really a king. King is too strong. I mean, you can make an argument that the king is the weakest piece and the strongest piece on the board. If the king is the one that's giving orders, the king is the strongest piece on the board. He's just weak when somebody's trying to go after him. He's not a king, but he doesn't move well. That's true. He's a knight in the corner. He's a knight on the rim. Let's say it that way. A knight on the rim is dim. He's a knight on the rim. Let's call him that. Let's end this on that. Beto is a knight on the rim. He can't move more than one space. I know, but he's the one giving orders. Like, God, we're going to get to trust metaphors. Technically, from the standpoint of chess, the king is the one giving orders, right? In a philosophical sense, the king is the one that's essentially telling everyone what to do. The queen is one of the strongest pieces on the game from the standpoint of the lateral movement of her domain, her strength in regards to what she could do on the board itself. But ultimately, she is still taking orders. She is an order taker, regardless of her strength on the board. I hope that makes sense. The king's weakness is when something is attacking him, yes. And his ability to move, yes. In a physical sense, in a physical matter of reality of the chessboard, yes. But in a philosophical sense, the king is the one that is giving orders on that board. And as the king, the one giving orders on that board, everybody else on that board is an order taker, including the queen, regardless of her strength. Cruz is not a queen. I thought the Grand Visor was giving orders. Chess metaphors, the king wears a cross and the queen wears a crown. I know it, right? Religion and government, that's what makes all the pieces move. Why would the pawns do anything without it? Oh, I love that, I love that. We're in the chess metaphors. We're in the chess metaphors. Fucking I love my audience. But you're right, by the way. The crown and the religion. God, I never thought of that. I fucking never thought of that. That's beautiful. Never thought of that. Because it is. It's true. I mean, ultimately, we're talking about the control of the masses. And how do you control the masses? Well, you have military force, so you have that. But the military force is made up of human beings. Those human beings need some kind of thing, some kind of glue to hold them together. And the glue that holds them together, at least up to this point, is this idea of religious belief and this idea of government. We have a country. This country is an us, meaning all of us is under this idea of let's say, the United States or France or Britain. All of us are one thing. You realize it wasn't always that way. I mean, if I am not mistaken, I want to say this started in Britain, but I could be wrong on this. MacArthur, Louisiana. Hey, Jamal, I like when you do videos on UFOs. I like doing videos on UFOs too. I am punishment must fit the crime. Punishment must fit the crime. Wesley Walker, what's happening, Wesley? I like doing videos on UFOs too. So the problem, it's a political channel. And because it's a political channel, there has to be a certain degree of flexibility in regards to how far you can go with that. So I can push into the areas of UFOs to a certain degree, but it only could go so far. I've had all sorts of UFO people on this channel, even one that I don't particularly agree with. I find all of those videos interesting, even if I disagree with the content in some of them. I wish I knew how to play chess decently. I've thought about teaching. I've played chess since I was a kid, and I wish I hadn't lost my edge. Like when I started playing chess when I was, I think, 12 years old. Well, I was in middle school. Bradford Cunningham, and I remember this because it was significant. Bradford Cunningham says, "Hey, you want to go to the chess club?" "What's that?" "It's just a game, you know. I don't know how to play chess." "Well, you can come to chess club. You can learn." And from that point to today, love the game. Not just love the game. I've used it as a respite, an area of bubble of reality that kept me away when things were horrible and shitty and painful and my world was a living shit and piss. I went through 10 years of multiple surgeries every year. Just weird shit, just bizarre stuff, just random shit that would take place. And chess, I would always have my chessboard with me. Like every time I was in a hospital, the thing that I would carry along with me is this chessboard, and I would set my board up, and I would play because for the most part there's nothing to do. So you would just study and play, and people would be like, "Who are you playing?" And it's like, "Well, I'm going through games." He's like, "What do you mean going through games?" It's like, well, you study chess like you study anything else. You have to get good at it by reviewing other people's content, other ideas, things that people do. Garry Kasparov, he sucks in the political space, but in chess, the man is. I've yet to see anything that comes near what Garry Kasparov did on that chessboard. Even though in a political space, he sucks ass. Like, it's fucking fascinating. Mikhail Tal, favorite chess player, hands down. It's not so much that Mikhail Tal was the best, but, it's kind of like Spider-Man or Batman. The thing that some degree makes him amazing or makes him good is because of his lack of power, not necessarily because he has all the power in the world. Superman is a difficult person to write for because Superman is almost godlike in his abilities, whereas limitation, constriction, those are the things that make a character interesting, and to some degree, their fallibility, their weaknesses, are the things that make them lovable. Same thing with Mikhail Tal. Smoked, drank, had kidney issues, but the complexity of his games he could not get away with that shit playing a computer, but playing a human being that's fallible. One of the things that you need to understand, even in politics, is the threat is always worse than the actual action. Because you can't necessarily always think about what threats are coming your way, and you can't necessarily always fully grasp what the consequences are going to be of actions that are taking place. In chess, sometimes a threat is worse than the actual move itself. Because the individual is looking at the threat, trying to figure out how are they going to counter it, what's going to come next after that, what the person has in mind. They have all of these things in their head, and in many respects, the things in their head are plaguing them and tearing into them. When the move is played, however, there's a certain diminutive effect. Sometimes the threat is serious. Sometimes the threat is real. Sometimes the threat is not worse than the bite, meaning the bark is not worse than the bite. Sometimes the bite is what the bite is. But that's not always true, and in many cases, the threat is worse. Mikhail Tal had this odd, interesting way of creating all of these threats, sacrificing pieces, going after people in ways that just seems wildly impractical. And yet, grandmasters, this happy-go-lucky chess as they called it, had an inability to deal. He became world champion playing in that way. It's fucking amazing. It's a mind-blowing thing. Garry Kasparov got beaten by R2-D2. Yes, he did. Deep Blue, yes he did. That's a funny thing. It's a funny thing. Garry Kasparov, so two things. When you're playing a computer, computers are played differently than human beings. Human beings have a faculty that disregards moves. It's like if you're reading a document and there's a spelling error in the document, your brain skips over the spelling error to some degree. Sometimes you see it, but oftentimes, especially if you wrote it, you skip over it because you know what the person is saying. Same thing if you're reading something upside down. You can read something upside down because your brain essentially makes it work. Your brain fills in the gaps. When you're playing chess, that faculty of filling in the gaps helps you say, okay, I don't need to consider these moves because these moves don't really matter. It's nonsense. Pushing this pawn doesn't really matter to anything that's going on in the main theater of war. Computers don't do that. Computers have this brute force way of going through the moves. And in doing this brute force way, they find odd, weird patterns that a human being may not necessarily find. And oftentimes, 9 times out of 10, wouldn't necessarily find. Playing them, sometimes chess players play them differently, meaning they would play them in a way to try to mitigate the computer's ability to find those moves. So instead of playing in a normal way that you would play, that's more open, that's more aggressive, you play in this, I'm trying to keep down, minimize the ability for the computer to find weaknesses and minimize tactical opportunities. Garry Kasparov played those games in that way. Now, Garry Kasparov is an immensely strong player, but he gave up himself to some degree in order to play in that way, and he lost. He lost. Have you ever thought of interviewing Bernie Sanders? Bernie Sanders would never come on this show. Bernie Sanders wouldn't even go on Jimmy Dore. MacArthur, Louisiana. There are a lot of people I would love to talk to. Not even interview, just talk to. Noam Chomsky being one of them. Howard Zinn, but Howard Zinn has passed. Jack Fresco, but Jack Fresco has passed. I started this show apparently too late. Bernie Sanders, yes, is one of them. He would never come on this show. Max Blumenthal, Ben Norton, Cal Kalinske. There are all sorts of people that I would love to interview. Bernie goes on JT, Jimmy Dore will lose it. No, he won't. I don't believe it. No, he won't. No, he won't. No, he won't. Look, you must understand, part of so sometimes things that people feel creates aberrant behavior, and it comes out in weird ways. There was one time I met my dad. I was driving, and in a chance encounter with my dad. I hadn't talked to him in months. And he's at this woman's house, and I don't give a shit if he's at this woman's house. I know he's, he's a player in this regard. But I have an odd, complicated relationship, or I had an odd, complicated relationship with him. And I talked to him. It was just regular conversation. I get in the car. I go speeding through the stop sign. I nearly hit a car. To this day, I can't tell you why I did that. Now, there was something in me that was angry at the experience. And instead of dealing with the fact that I was angry at the experience, it kind of came out in this weird, awkward way. Where after the fact, you're like, ooh, that was a bad idea. I fucked up. I shouldn't have did that. If I would have hit somebody, it would have been impossible for me to explain why it happened. Entirely impossible for me to explain why it happened. Nonetheless, the feeling was there. People are angry at Sanders because they love Sanders. And Jimmy Dore is no different. I strongly suspect that the reason, if any animus that takes place between Dore and Sanders, it has to do with this idea of how much he wanted him to win. And in Sanders losing on this, supporting Clinton, it broke him. Something in him changed. This idea of why are you kowtowing to this party when this party cheated you? And the argument is right. Now, that said, I think Bernie Sanders is in a different place. The position of Jimmy Dore, he can do that. Bernie Sanders is in a different place. I say that not to make excuses for Sanders. I say that to say that the world that Sanders inhabits is a fundamentally different world that Jimmy Dore inhabits. The perspective of Jimmy Dore in this case would be fundamentally different if Jimmy Dore was in Bernie Sanders' shoes, because Bernie Sanders did what Bernie Sanders did, showing that if the human element was changed, he would act the same way. The fact that Sanders behaved in the way that Sanders behaved. And by the way, in retrospect, Sanders was right. Sanders was right. Now, understand what I mean by this. When William Wallace, back during FDR time, ran as a third-party candidate, even though he was one of the most popular candidates in this country, he ended up with, I think, like 10% of the vote. Passable share, nowhere near chance of winning. Sanders was able to fundamentally change the conversation that we're having. He created a luft, a significant space. Medicare for all became a tip of the spear. $15 minimum wage became an issue that's on the books, that people are talking about, not necessarily something that's being silently pushed away. Expanding Social Security, Medicare benefits. Like, those are things that have become on the marquee. And to some degree, you can even make an argument that Medicare for all, like I said, tip of the spear to any Democrat that wants to get elected, especially if they want to get progressives on board. If Bernie Sanders ran as a third party and Bernie Sanders lost, all of this, the weight of the entire political establishment, all of them, you thought blaming Nader when Al Gore lost 300,000 Democrats who voted for Bush in Florida. You think blaming Nader would have been bad. Everybody would have screamed, Bernie fucking Sanders lost the race for Hillary Clinton. And any notion of the stuff that Sanders was pushing would have gotten drowned out by the cacophony of noise, screaming that he got Donald Trump elected. In the end, Bernie Sanders' choice, as much as I dislike it, was right. It was right. But it was right for Bernie Sanders. There's a difference in the context of the individuals and their functions and their roles in our society. Bernie Sanders is a politician. Bernie Sanders has to deal with political concerns and political realities. I, to some degree, am a dissident. You can make an argument that Dore is a dissident. And the responsibility of us is to push the conversation and to make sure that these guys are held accountable. Push the dialogue, push the conversation, drag the conversation to the left. It's the argument of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Malcolm X makes Martin Luther King a hell of a lot more palatable to a society that doesn't even think racial issues are a big deal. I'm making the point to you that as difficult and as painful as seeing Bernie Sanders being broken in this way and shaped to form, his message and the language won out. I hope that's clear. I hope that's clear. Dore is not wrong, but neither was Sanders. I hope that's clear. I hope that's clear. Mark MacArthur, Louisiana. Jamarl, I'm sick and tired of Democrats. I want a party that will go after big pharma and suppressing cures. Yes. Agreed. Agreed. I have no disagreement with this. The argument for Dem exit, to some degree, makes itself. Do you believe that the Democratic Party represents your interests? Do you believe that they've used identity politics as wedge issues as a way of ignoring economic realities? Meaning the Republican Party is so batshit crazy that the only thing we need to do is focus on identity politics, and we can take economics off the table. I'm sick of that. How do you break that model? Do you break that model by continuously voting for the same hacks, the same corporate hacks that are put up, the same invertebrates that are put up? that you know 1,000 times no, are going to be in the pockets of whoever putting money in their G-strings. That model needs to be broken. I would argue to you that Bernie Sanders is an independent. He's not a Democrat. I have no issue full-throatedly supporting him on this. But by the same token, I have no issue supporting Democrats if I think they represent my interests. It just depends on the Democrat. It just depends on the person. I like Tulsi Gabbard. I like Nina Turner. If Tulsi Gabbard ran for office, Tulsi Gabbard would get my vote full-throatedly. Sanders' third way. If Sanders ran three-way in a 2016, I expect 75% turnout. If he won, it would have crushed the Democrats and forced a new party. Yes, it's a gamble. If he lost, Democrats would have a serious conversation about RCV if they ever wanted to win again. No, that I don't believe. That I don't believe. They didn't have a serious conversation now. Why do you believe they would have had it if Sanders lost? They would have turned around and said, this is Sanders' fault. It's Sanders was completely responsible for Hillary Clinton losing the race and Donald Trump being the president of the United States. And anything that Sanders wanted would have been pushed to the side. They would have said that the reason that they lost was because Sanders split the vote. Whether it was true or not, it would have been somewhat irrelevant. They would just say Sanders split the vote. But you're right. If Sanders would have won, it would have completely destroyed what it meant for the Democratic Party to exist. Agreed. Agreed. That I agree with you on, Baltazar. But I disagree with you. I am more cynical than you on this. Because I look at what took place here. Hillary Clinton lost her reality show host. She got the stuffing beat out of her to reality show host. She got 3 million more votes, and people like to tout that, but all of it came from one state. Came from one state. It's like, fuck, one fucking state doesn't make the entirety of the country. You have different political realities in the various parts of the country. It doesn't. It's not the end-all be-all in California. I guarantee you that Russians will help Beto the fixerisms. Why do you think Russians will help Beto? I like that you guys are talking through the difficulties of Democrat versus third party. You're being adults. Well, yes. I mean, and that's where you get me wrong, Jay. I mean, you fundamentally get me wrong. You believe that I am an absolutist on this point. I am not. I've never been an absolutist. I've said at the beginning of the show, you support the person that represents your interests. If that person so happens to be a Democrat, God bless. I am not even on this camp that is in this thing that it is completely irreparable. What it means to be a Democrat needs to be fundamentally changed. And that party needs to burn to the ground in order to make that change. Meaning the leadership of the party needs to fundamentally change. These guys are out there manipulating the results through the country. But does that mean that there aren't certain bright spots that are running in the party apparatus? There are bright spots. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a bright spot. Ojeda is a bright spot. There was another candidate, I can't think of the name of the place where she was running. That's a bright spot. There are candidates who are running as bright spots. Not to mention, there have been sea changes. Bill Clinton was a fundamental change in what it meant to be a Democrat. FDR was a fundamental change in what it meant to be a Democrat. But FDR was able to put his stamp on the party that exceeded for the next 50, 60 years. Your problem is, I take issue with the lesser evil mentality because the lesser evil mentality has brought us to where we are. And places like West Virginia that voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump, despite being adversely affected by Donald Trump. That needs to be engaged. Your political party is not engaging those things. Yes, been jealous. It's pretty legit. I guess I'm making the point to you that this lesser evil mentality is what brought you to this place. And this pragmatic approach of idiots like Sam Cedar, who's fucking fundamentally missing the realities of people in the society itself that voted no. They wanted a fundamental change, not status quo. They wanted a fundamental change. But people like Sam Cedar, the pragmatic approach. Your pragmatic approach failed to reality shows. Own it. Own that. as opposed to out there voter shaming. It's not Susan Sarandon, it's not Jimmy Dore, none of that. It's a fundamental flaw in the party apparatus itself from the standpoint of Democrats. Own it. People are sick of incrementalism. Even if you can make an argument that Bill Clinton's triangulation was a good thing at the time, the looking at people saying you have nowhere else to go was not. There was a fundamental break between what it meant to be a Democrat versus what it meant to be their base. And the politically abused spouse of the Democratic Party needs to grow up and hold that party accountable. Or yes, be willing to let it fail. Otherwise, nothing changes. Cedar was also a Hillary supporter. He was also a Hillary supporter. American insurgent, and browbeating people that didn't vote Hillary, as opposed to dealing with the fact that they put up Hillary Clinton in the first place. American insurgent. They don't even talk about Russia much anymore. And yeah, I didn't like how much they covered it before, but to say that their establishment is pretty off base to me. I don't know who you're talking about. You talking about Cedar? What are you talking about? Cedar's a MSNBC co-host. Don't get me wrong. I've said on multiple occasions that Sam Cedar is in my sandbox. I stand by that. He is in my sandbox. By the same token, he's also attacking Dore relentlessly. And you have to come to this thing that part of the problem is stuff like that. Like, the issue is not Dore. Dore is a natural outgrowth, a rational outgrowth of the environment to which Dore existed. Full stop. Oh, you're talking about TYT. I said they're MSNBC light. And I'll stand by it. Sam Cedar is to say a bird in your sandbox. The reason I say he's in my sandbox, because I think people like Sam Cedar, Tom Hartman, David Pakman, if the political space shifted to the left, they will be your allies. They will be pushing for the same things that you're pushing for. But they have a fundamentally different idea on how to get there. It's this idea of we want change, but we don't want to do anything to actually get real change because we're terrified of real change. I mean, it's that mentality. TYT, I say, is MSNBC light. I stand by that. The only thing they talk about is Trump. There should be a movement. Brenda Snipes for prison, yes. Supervisor who destroyed Tim Canova's lawsuit ballots. Whether it's prison or not, I'm always amazed that gets a pass. That shouldn't get a pass. The 1% own TYT, don't lie to yourself. Fixerisms. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying is unabashedly support for TYT. Why do people think TYT is extreme left? I have no idea why they think TYT is extreme left. No clue. Hasn't figured out how to breathe. His head is so buried in a sandbox, Sam Cedar hasn't figured out how to breathe yet. No, I may poke fun at Sam Cedar. I don't dislike Sam Cedar. I love it when he's going after libertarians because the argument structure that he takes after them is right. It's right. It's right 1,000 times right. Libertarians, their argument is nonsensical. This belief that markets are gods is nonsense. But the real fight here needs to take place within the Democratic Party. It does. They should be landsliding. You have the most knuckle-dragging Republicans. And these guys are still winning. Still winning. The election is coming up in November. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. There's certain people that, God, I really want to win. Beto is one of them. Ojeda is another one. And like I said, there are a few others that I'm looking at that I want to win. We need radical movements along inspiring politicians that give people to vote for. Yes. GTA IV man. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. At least if Bernie had acted as a third-party spoiler, there would have been a bright spot. America's foreign policy would have been affected by Russiagate, but instead Sandersgate would have occurred. Yeah, but is that what you want? Is that what you really want? I mean, because understand what that means. Right now, you can make an argument that Sanders has won the argument. When Obama was running, there was no talk of Medicare for all. Obama talked about a public option. That was the best that you were going to get, and even that was scuttled pretty quickly when he got in office. There was no talk of expanding Social Security benefits. This idea of a $15 minimum wage was unheard of. And all of these things have been put on the marquee. This has been the argument. Don't get me wrong. People, they hate Sanders. They hate his guts because ultimately he shows them up for what they are. He is the epitome of what they are not. But ultimately, Sanders is just a classic Democrat. He's just a classic Democrat. Yeah, he's just a classic Democrat. All right, this video has gone way, way too long. Extremely too long. And I really want to get if progressives pre-pledged spoil into the platform match, saying, here's the thing about third parties. It's not that third parties are going to outright win. It's that they push the conversation and they pull the other party further to the left. The entire reason that Sanders got into the race with Hillary Clinton was in order to pull her to the left, not to win. Sanders didn't believe he was going to win. It was only when he caught fire, when he realized, oh my God, I have a chance to win this, that he actually started running as a real candidate. If he would have went after her balls out early on, Sanders could have won that contest. He could have won that contest. Creative experiments. Talking, quote unquote, if about DNC is just more hope and change bullcrap. Look, I agree with that to a certain degree. Look, my stance hasn't changed. I am pretty solid on this point. Vote for the person who represents your interests. If you're a rich fuck and you believe that your interest is best represented by a Ted Cruz, that's gross, but go for it. Fuck the world, I'm doing my own, go for it. But for the 99%, vote for the person that represents your interests. Full stop. That's where I am. But I gotta be honest. That puts me in a position of dim exit in the majority of cases. Or, in this case, voting Greens or some other candidate that represents my interests. In Virginia, I don't really have anybody to vote for. So, there's that. But I mean that. And I don't mean a bullshit representing your interests in this kind of squishy, invertebrate corporate Democrat way where you know this guy's taking money and you know this guy's doing favors. I mean a full out and out lefty that you earnestly believe it, or at the very least that you believe that has enough space to move the ball forward. I'm sorry, that's not Hillary Clinton. But yes, between Beto and Cruz, that is Beto. Progressives are set up as the enemy of democracy in both parties when these simmer. I don't think it's the enemy of both parties. Look, I don't care what takes place in the other party. Full stop. Republicans are maniacs. Yes, I would vote for Gillum. But I would go into eyes open. Yes, but I would vote for him. I think Gillum is a fraud, but I would over DeSantis. Yeah, I would vote for him, but I don't have this idea that Gillum is going to be this flaming lefty. I guess that's the thing, right? It's... You try to move the ball forward. But that doesn't mean that you support every random hack. And I say that to say this. What is your goal? And if the goal is actually to change things, then perpetuating a system that maintains it would never achieve your goal. It just perpetuates the system as it is. I don't like DeSantis. And I don't like this racist rhetoric that DeSantis has used in this campaign. Gillum has at least ran as a lefty. And if he gets in office, he is going to have a lot of shit that he's going to be held account to. If Gillum does not uphold the shit that he has, he needs to be voted down and he needs to fail. I don't care who's on the side of him. That's called accountability. This is kind of the politics that I'm talking about here. Does the person represent my interests, yes or no? What is this person saying? And is what that person saying commiserate with what the person did in office? DeSantis is a worse choice than Gillum. I mean, after all, they have Rick Scott. Rick Scott is gross. Gillum is a move forward. But is Gillum going to be this flaming lefty that Gillum pretends to be? No, I don't believe so. Is he better than DeSantis? Fuck yes. Fuck yes. Yeah. But yeah, J. Scott, I would. If I was in Florida, I would. Wes. Oh, thank you, Wes. Did something happen with the t-shirt shop, Jamarl? Tried the other day and couldn't get the link to work. Seriously? I'll check it out. Nothing had happened to it as far as I know. I'll check it tonight. Placement matter. Does your argument work if Clinton came in third? At that point, Hillary spoiled it for Bernie. Oh, that's fascinating. You're right. So placement matters. You're right. You're right. You're right. God, man, you're right. I have an idea of the world, and that idea of the world is not necessarily indicative of reality. You're right. At that point, she spoiled it for Bernie. Yeah, you're right. And at that point, there's a change in conversation. On that, you're right. Balthazar, you're right. You're right. I guess my point is the third party thing is a major risk. That's a gamble. The thing is, Americans are primed with this idea of the voting in two parties, even if they don't necessarily believe in the two-party system. Like, they've grown up from the day that they were born to the day that they dropped dead, that you have two parties in this country, Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and the idea that those parties have existed legitimizes the fact that they should exist. That's nonsense, of course. Just because something exists doesn't necessarily mean it should persist on. Like persistence in it, or existence in and of itself is not an argument for persistence. It needs to legitimize itself. It needs to be able to make the argument to say why it should exist and why it should operate in the way that it operates. That's both parties, by the way. Now, the thing is, the moment that you run as a third party, the public has to be able to jump that hurdle. And part of that hurdle is legitimacy of the other candidate. Can the person win? Part of the problem with the Green Party is, A, it calls itself the Green Party, so it sounds like they care about the environment when people are being, working class and all of these type of issues. That's not necessarily true, but that's the perspective of it. Also, it's the perspective that they can't win. Now, this perspective that they can't win is entirely reinforced, of course, by both parties, because they're incentivized to reinforce their perspective that Green parties or other parties can't win. The esoteric other. That's what I like to call it. Meaning an individual, even if they don't like Clinton, even if they don't want to vote for Trump, they still think to themselves, oh God, what's least worse? And of the least worst options, even though I think this person represents my interests more, even though I would want to vote for that person in the third party, I want to be part of choosing the person who wins. And of the person who I think is going to have a better chance of winning is these two. Now, forget the fact that the Green Party might get 20% if people just voted their intention or voted who they believe represented their interests. Or, for that matter, voted their conscience. But that's not the way it ends up working. It's this esoteric other, this idea of what other people are going to do. And in this idea of what other people are going to do, you have a lot of people who may have voted for the Green Party that ends up voting for one of the other two, either Trump or Clinton. That's a hurdle. That would even be a hurdle with Bernie Sanders, if Bernie Sanders ran. Now, is it possible that Bernie Sanders could overcome that hurdle because everybody knows who Bernie Sanders is? Maybe. But it's a risk. And understand, if he loses, and if he is not the person who gets the second place, all of your advancements are trashed. Just saying. It's a gamble. It's a gamble in the context of what we have now, where the loss of Hillary Clinton is roundly understood as just the loss of Hillary Clinton, that any notion of Russia is for the most part looked at as nonsense, or the public may believe that Russia might have had something to do with it because the media has spent 2 years, but they don't care. It doesn't necessarily materially affect their life, so they don't care regardless of how much the media talks about it. And it further serves to delegitimize the media and serves to delegitimize the party that's crying sour grapes about it. A party that cheated Bernie Sanders, that the American public knows cheated Bernie Sanders, is howling about cheating. And in howling about cheating, they're saying that there were Facebook and Twitter ads, half of which that took place after the election, that overwhelmed the $1 billion that Clinton spent on the race. This is utter nonsense. I'd much prefer that the loss of Hillary Clinton be isolated to the failure of Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party, that they lost reality show hosts. I don't want that to be blamed on Bernie Sanders. I don't want that associated with Sanders at all. I don't want it to be associated at all. Yes, Lance. Jamal, would you be prepared to start a rogue Sanders campaign if he cheated again? Sanders can plausibly deny any involvement. It would be called Crowley Sanders maneuver. I love that. The Crowley Sanders maneuver. Stein went on the Jimmy Dore show. I saw that. She was talking about third party. So Green Party, people always say that the Green Party never runs local candidates. That's not true at all. The Green Party does run local candidates. They run local candidates all the time. And the Green Party wins in California. They do win in California. Yeah. So it's not, it's not fully true that the Green Party doesn't run local candidates. They use that to hit at the Green Party. But that's a fascinating thought, that if Hillary Clinton came in third, what will happen to the Democratic Party? What would happen? What would happen? That would start a conversation. That would have to. Because that's not a situation of Clinton being, undermined. That's a situation of her just losing, full stop, across the board, to everybody that was in the race. Exception of just 9. But that's a different reality that we face. Is it better politics in the way that Sanders has gone about it, with the potential of running in 2020? Everybody knows who he is. His full name recognition. He's still loved. He's still jumping across the country. He's still retaining the aspect of himself that people loved. If he runs in 2020, Sanders wins. Delusions of grandeur. In fact, I gotta show this. Because sometimes I don't think the full awesomeness of these tweets come to bear. Delusions, Peter Dow, of grandeur. Even if we go with the theoretical Hillary Clinton presidency, GOP will stall her SCROTUS pick and keep at it for 8 to 4 years. GOP blocks Democrats for 4 years and stalls. 2018 blowback. The GOP might get 38 state legislatures. The GOP now can make a constitutional amendment alone. God. Yeah, man. That's a fair point, right? That's a fair point. That is a fair point. The right wing is scared enough about the prospect of Andrew Gillum winning the Project Veritas. Just released an undercover hit piece, a tell-all hidden camera video of the true politics of Andrew. They're doing the same thing on Beto, by the way. This stuff is nonsense. This stuff is utter nonsense. Winder simmer. Neither Gillum or Beto are going to win. The polls by the mainstream media only meant to build hope where reality does not fit the need. I don't know why you believe that. This is one of those things where I think, I don't know why you believe that. I don't know why you believe that. Sometimes I think people think things in order to push their own ideas of the world. A poll is a poll. A poll is a poll. It is very possible that Beto wins. It is very possible that Gillum wins. I have no idea why you believe that. The right wing is scared. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that all of the U.S. caravan rhetoric to drive Republicans to the voting booths. Yes, it is. Perfect time, hot topic, because a few times. Yes, that's true, by the way. That caravan is like 2 months out. And Donald Trump is talking about sending 15,000 troops to the border. Some insane nonsense, utter nonsense. Poor, dirt poor people that are walking to this country. Mexico has said it would give them shelter and jobs and so forth, and they've turned it down. I guess they're coming to seek asylum. Donald Trump is breaking the law and not allowing, at the very least, the potential for asylum. Why do you believe mainstream media posts? I think a poll is a poll. It is what it is. I mean, under your idea of the world, they would have to be monkeying around with the polls. I have no idea why they would do that. The polls are just the polls. Who's leading in Texas? Ted Cruz is leading in Texas. But it's narrowed to like 5 points. The DNC will put a worse than Hillary candidate. Stop being surprised and lower your expectations. What are you talking about? I don't have expectations. That is the path to take a third party. How much more evidence do you need? I don't know what you're talking about. My expectations aren't anywhere. I don't have expectations at all. What I'm thinking is that Sanders may run again. He seems to want to run again. He seems to act like he's going to run again. He's been talking about foreign policy. He's been talking to African-American communities and shoring up the areas that he didn't shore up before. He still has a financial thing, meaning he can still raise money like nobody's business. It is very possible that Sanders runs. He's not a Democrat. He's not a Democrat. Is fascism what the news says Trump is commanding? Yeah, Donald Trump plays up this stuff because what Donald Trump knows is that if the Democrats take the House, Trump may be impeached. That's what he knows. Democrats will start investigations like nobody's business into Trump. No, Bernie Sanders is an independent. Go look it up. Go look it up. I hope Canada sets up a large-scale invasion of the United States from the border and put troops there. He's not going to care if Canada does it. They're white. Wouldn't take much to organize provocateur agents to convince people to refuse the Mexican offer and continue to America. Am I turning into a conspiracy nut? No, they turned it down. They turned Mexico down. They turned Mexico down. Creative experiments. The DNC will not let Bernie win. That's possible creative experiments. You might be right. That might be right. All right. I'm going to end this. I keep saying that. My wife is laughing at me. She's sitting here. She's laughing. Guys, I want to thank you all for your support. They demonetize one video after the next. At the moment that a video goes up, the video is demonetized. So I appreciate everybody that continues to support the show. Wes, Beltzar, Well, Wes and Balthazar. Thank you very much, guys. Y'all have a good one. And Wes,